My mom told my son, maybe if you talked less, people would like you more. So I said maybe if you remembered his dad pays the mortgage, you'd choose your words more carefully. Then I put the house in foreclosure. My mom could be a lot of things. Cold, judgmental, weirdly obsessed with appearances. But I never thought she'd go after my kid. Not directly. Not like that. Let me back up and give you the full picture because this didn't happen in a vacuum. This was years in the making, and honestly, I should have seen it coming. I just didn't want to. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Small town, decent people. The kind of place where everybody knows your business and pretends they don't. My mom, Diane, was a school teacher for 30 years. 4th grade. And if you're picturing a warm, nurturing woman who baked cookies and gave out gold stars, I need you to delete that image immediately. My mom was the kind of teacher kids respected out of fear, not affection. She ran her classroom like a courtroom, and she ran our house the same way. My dad, Ray, was a good man. Quiet, worked at the grain elevator his whole life, came home tired, sat in his recliner, and let my mom handle everything else. I don't blame him for that. He was a product of his generation. But it meant that when my mom decided something, that was the law, and there was no appeals process. I have one brother, Garrett. He's 2 years older than me, and growing up, he was everything my mom wanted in a son. Student council president, varsity baseball, dated the right girls, said the right things at dinner. Garrett knew how to perform for my mother, and she rewarded him for it constantly. I was the other one. The one who talked too much, asked too many questions, laughed too loud, and couldn't sit still in church. My mom used to say things like, Garrett knows how to read a room. You could learn from him. I was 9 when she first said that to me. 9 years old, and my own mother was essentially telling me that my personality was a problem she wished she could fix. Here's the thing, though. I wasn't a bad kid. I was a talker. I was curious. I wanted to know how things worked, why people did what they did, what was behind every closed door and around every corner. I was the kid who'd strike up a conversation with the cashier at the grocery store, who'd ask the mailman about his day, who'd sit next to the new kid at lunch because nobody else would. My mom saw all of that as a deficit. She called it being too much, and I internalized that phrase like it was tattooed on the inside of my skull. Too much. Luke is just too much. Fast forward through a childhood of being the less preferred son, and you'll find me at 25 married to the most incredible woman I've ever met. Her name is Jess. She's a speech therapist, which is ironic given everything that happened, and she has this way of making everyone around her feel heard. She's the opposite of my mother in every meaningful way. When I told Jess about my childhood, about the comparisons and the too much comments, she looked at me like I'd told her someone had committed a crime. That's not parenting, Luke, she said. That's conditioning. I married her 3 months later. Best decision I ever made. Our son Oliver came along when I was 26. And from the moment that kid opened his eyes, I knew exactly who he was. He was me. Same energy, same curiosity, same motor that just wouldn't quit. Oliver talked to everyone. He asked questions about everything. He'd walk up to a stranger at the park and ask them what their favorite dinosaur was, and within 5 minutes, he'd have a new best friend. He was magnetic, he was joyful, he was according to my mother a lot. The first time my mom said it about Oliver, he was 4. We were at a family barbecue at Garrett's house, and Oliver was running around the yard telling anyone who'd listen about the butterfly he'd seen that morning. My mom pulled me aside and said, "You need to teach that boy some restraint, Luke. Not everyone wants to hear his little stories." I felt my chest tighten. I recognized that tone. I'd heard it my entire life, and now she was aiming it at my son. I told her he was 4 and that 4-year-olds talk. She gave me that look, the one that says, "I'm not arguing with you, I'm just right," and walked away. Over the next few years, it became a pattern. Every holiday, every visit, every phone call, my mom would find a way to comment on Oliver's personality. "He's very energetic, isn't he? Not a question, a diagnosis. Does he ever just sit quietly? You should look into whether he has something, Luke. That level of talking isn't normal." Jess and I took Oliver to his pediatrician not because we thought anything was wrong, but because my mom's comments were starting to get under Jess's skin. The doctor said Oliver was a perfectly healthy, socially advanced, verbally gifted kid. He said, and I quote, "You've got a natural communicator on your hands. Don't let anyone dim that light." I should have drawn the line right there. I should have told my mom that her opinions about my son's personality were no longer welcome. But I didn't. Because some part of me, some stupid, stubborn little kid, part of me still wanted her approval. Still thought that if I just handled things the right way, she'd come around. She'd see Oliver the way the rest of the world did. She'd see me the way the rest of the world did. That was the lie I told myself all the way up to Christmas dinner 2 years ago, the dinner that changed everything. My mom hosted Christmas every year. It was her thing, her production. The table was set like a magazine spread. The food was impeccable. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon and passive aggression. Garrett and his wife Brooke would be there with their 2 kids who were quiet and well-behaved because Garrett had essentially trained them to be furniture in social setting. My dad would be in his chair, half watching football, half asleep. And Jess and I would show up with Oliver, who burst through the door like a golden retriever at a tennis ball factory, ready to hug everyone and tell them about whatever he'd learned that week. This particular Christmas, Oliver was 8. He just finished a school project on space and he was obsessed. He wanted to tell everyone about black holes, about the International Space Station, about how astronauts go to the bathroom in zero gravity. He was vibrating with excitement the entire car ride over. Jess and I exchanged a look in the front seat. We both knew. We both felt it. Something about this visit felt heavier than usual, but we went anyway because that's what you do. You show up, you hope for the best. You tell yourself this time will be different. It wasn't different. It was worse. It was the worst it had ever been. We pulled into my mom's driveway at exactly 4:30. The house looked like a Hallmark card. Lights on the porch, a wreath on the door. Fake snow sprayed in the corners of the windows. Oliver unbuckled his seatbelt before I even had the car in park. "Dad, do you think Grandma will want to hear about the space station?" he asked already halfway out the door. I looked at Jess. She gave me a small, tight smile. "Of course she will, buddy," I said. I didn't believe it, but I said it anyway because what kind of father tells his 8-year-old that his grandmother doesn't care about the things that make him happy? We walked in, and the house was already full. Garrett and Brooke were in the living room with their kids, Mason and Ellie, who were sitting on the couch like they'd been told to hold still until someone gave them permission to move. My dad was in his recliner. My mom came out of the kitchen in an apron, hugged me stiffly. Hugged Jess, the same way. When Oliver ran up and threw his arms around her waist, she patted his head once and said, "Shoes off at the door, Oliver. Not Merry Christmas. Not, I'm glad you're here. Shoes off at the door." Dinner was at 600. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade rolls, cranberry sauce from scratch. We all sat down, my dad said grace, and for about 10 minutes everything was fine. Garrett was talking about his promotion. Brooke was telling Jess about some renovation show. The kids were eating quietly. Oliver was eating too, but he was bouncing slightly in his chair because he'd been holding in his space facts for 45 minutes, and the kid was about to explode. During a lull in conversation, Oliver saw his opening. "Grandma, did you know that astronauts on the space station see 16 sunrises every single day because they're going so fast around the Earth that the sun comes up every 90 minutes? He was beaming. His eyes were huge. He looked like a kid who'd just discovered the most incredible thing in the world and wanted to share it with someone he loved. My mom didn't even look up from her plate. "That's nice, Oliver." He kept going. Because of course he did. He was 8 and excited, and he didn't know that "that's nice" from my mother was a warning shot. "And did you know that in space your tears don't fall? They just float on your eyes because there's no gravity to pull them down." "Isn't that so cool, Oliver?" my mom said, still not looking at him. "People are trying to eat." Jess put her hand on Oliver's leg under the table. I could see her doing it. A gentle squeeze. A silent message. But Oliver was already on a roll, and honestly, the kid wasn't doing anything wrong. He was sharing something he was passionate about at a family dinner. That's what family dinners are supposed to be for. "One more thing," Oliver said, holding up his finger like a tiny professor. "If you went to space without a suit, you wouldn't explode like in movies. Your blood would actually start to boil because there's no air pressure, and then you'd pass out in like 15 seconds. Garrett's kid Mason looked up from his plate. "That's awesome," he said. It was the first time I'd heard Mason express genuine enthusiasm about anything, and it made me sad and happy at the same time. My mom set her fork down. She looked directly at Oliver, and the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. I felt it. Jess felt it. Even Garrett straightened up in his chair. "Oliver," my mom said, her voice calm and precise, the way she probably talked to misbehaving students for 3 decades. "Maybe if you talked less, people would like you more." The table went completely silent, the kind of silence that has weight to it. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Nobody moved. Oliver's face crumbled like someone had taken an eraser to every bit of joy that kid had been carrying and wiped it clean. His lower lip trembled, and he looked down at his plate, and he didn't say a single word. Jess's eyes filled up with tears. She wasn't a crier. In 9 years, I could count on one hand the number of times she'd cried, but she was crying now silently, and I could see something breaking behind her eye. Not sadness, something sharper. Rage wrapped in heartbreak. I looked at my mother. She picked her fork back up and took a bite of turkey like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just done to him exactly what she'd done to me for 34 years. And something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, more like a cable that had been fraying for decades finally giving way. I looked at my son, whose little shoulders were shaking. I looked at my wife, who was staring at me with expression that said, "Please." And I looked at my mother, chewing her food and ignoring the devastation she'd caused like it was background noise. I put down my fork. I folded my napkin. I pushed my chair back from the table. "Oliver," I said, keeping my voice steady, "say goodbye to Grandma, buddy. It's the last time." My mom's head snapped up. "Excuse me, we're leaving," I said, "and we're not coming back." "Luke, don't be dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I was just being honest. The boy never stops talking. Someone needs to tell him." "No," I said, "someone needed to tell you. Years ago. But nobody did because we were all too scared of you. I'm not scared anymore, Mom. And I'm not going to sit here and watch you do to my son what you did to me." The room was still frozen. Garrett was staring at his plate. Brooke had her hand over her mouth. My dad was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that almost looked like recognition. "What I did to you," my mom said, her voice rising. "I raised you. I fed you. I put a roof over your head. You spent my entire childhood telling me I was too much, I said, and now you're telling my son the same thing. You looked at an 8-year-old boy who was excited about space and told him that people would like him more if you just shut up. At Christmas dinner. I didn't say shut up, Luke. Don't put words in my mouth. You didn't have to. He heard it. We all heard it. I walked over to Oliver, knelt down beside his chair, and put my hands on his shoulders. Hey, bud. Look at me. He looked up, his eyes red, his chin wobbling. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. And we're going home now. Okay? He nodded. He didn't say anything. My chatty, brilliant, curious, wonderful kid didn't say a single word. And that silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Jess was already standing, grabbing Oliver's coat. She didn't look at my mother. She just held out her hand for our son. Luke, if you walk out that door over this, you're overreacting and you know it, my mom said. I turned around one last time. No, Mom. I've been underreacting for 34 years. This is what it looks like when I finally stop. We walked out. The cold Iowa air hit my face like a slap and I realized my hands were shaking. Not from anger, from grief. Because I just lost my mother, and the worst part was that I'd actually lost her a long time ago. I just hadn't been willing to admit it until she aimed her cruelty at someone I loved more than I loved the idea of having a mother who loved me back. We drove home in silence. Oliver fell asleep in the back seat after about 10 minutes. Jess reached over and took my hand and held it the entire way. When we got home, I carried Oliver inside and put him to bed. He woke up just enough to say, "Dad, am I really too much?" And I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood to keep from breaking down in front of him. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," I told him. "Don't let anyone make you feel small for being who you are." He closed his eyes and was out in seconds. I stood in his doorway for a long time watching him sleep, and I made a decision. Not emotional, not hot-headed, cold, clear, and permanent. My mother had had her last chance and she'd used it to hurt my kid. The week between Christmas and New Year's was the hardest week of my life, and I've had some rough ones. The morning after the dinner, I woke up to 11 missed calls from my mom, 4 from Garrett, and a text from my dad that just said, "I'm sorry, son." That was it. 3 words, no follow-up, no explanation. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a man who'd watched his wife hurt people for decades and never found the courage to stop it. My mom's voicemails were a masterclass in deflection. The first few were indignant. "Luke, this is your mother. I don't appreciate being made to feel like a villain for giving constructive feedback. Call me back." The next few were guilt trips. "I hope you're happy. You ruined Christmas for everyone. Garrett and Brooke are very upset." The last one, left around midnight, was the one that almost got me. Her voice was smaller, quieter. "I just don't understand what I did wrong. I love that boy. I love you. I don't know why you're punishing me." And for about 30 seconds, sitting on the edge of my bed at 1:00 in the morning, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I thought about Oliver's face at that table, the way his shoulders crumbled inward, the way he went silent like someone had flipped a switch, and I put my phone down and didn't pick it up again. Jess was my rock through all of it. She didn't push me to talk about it, but she made sure I knew she was there. She'd bring me coffee without asking. She'd sit next to me on the couch and just be present. One night, about 3 days after Christmas, she finally said what she'd been holding back. "Luke, I need you to know something. If you hadn't stood up and gotten us out of there, I would have. And it wouldn't have been as calm." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" I was about 2 seconds away from telling your mother exactly what I think of her. And it would have involved words that are not appropriate for Christmas dinner or any other meal. You saved your mom from me, honestly. I almost laughed. Almost. The harder part was Oliver. In the days after Christmas, my kid changed. Not dramatically, not in a way that someone outside our house would have noticed, but Jess and I noticed. Oliver, who normally talked from the moment he woke up until the moment he fell asleep, started getting quiet. Not all the time. He'd still talk to us, still tell us about things he'd learned. But there was a hesitation now, a half-second pause before he'd start a story, like he was weighing whether it was worth telling, like he was calculating whether he was being too much. It destroyed me. It absolutely destroyed me because I recognized it. That pause, that calculation, I'd done it my entire childhood. I'd spent years editing myself in real time, trimming the edges off my personality to fit into the space my mother had decided was acceptable. And now my son was doing it at 8 years old, because his grandmother had planted the same seed in his head that she'd planted in mine. The difference was, I wasn't going to let it grow. Jess and I sat Oliver down a few nights before New Year's Eve. We made hot chocolate. We put on a movie in the background and we talked to him. Not a lecture, not a big dramatic family meeting, just a conversation. "Hey, bud," I said, "can I tell you something about when I was a kid?" He nodded, clutching his mug with both hands. "When I was your age, Grandma used to tell me the same kind of stuff she said to you at dinner. She used to tell me I talked too much, that I was too loud, that I needed to be more like your Uncle Garrett. And for a really long time, I believed her. I thought there was something wrong with me." Oliver's eyes got big. "You did?" "Yeah. I spent years trying to be quieter, trying to take up less space, trying to be somebody I wasn't. And you know what happened? What I was miserable. Because there's nothing wrong with being a person who talks to people and asks questions and gets excited about things. That's not a flaw, Oliver. That's a gift." Jess jumped in. "Do you know what I do for work, buddy?" "You help kids talk," Oliver said. "That's right. I work with kids every day who struggle to find the words to tell people how they feel, what they need, what they're interested in. And you, Oliver, you have never had that problem. You walk into a room and you light it up. That's not being too much, that's being exactly right. Oliver was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Is that why we left Grandma's house?" "Yes," I said, "because what she said to you was wrong. It was hurtful and it was wrong. And I'm never going to let someone talk to you like that again. Not even family. Especially not family. Are we ever going to see Grandma again?" I looked at Jess. She looked at me. "I don't know, bud," I said. "That depends on whether Grandma can learn to be kind. And right now, I'm not sure she can." He nodded slowly like he understood more than an 8-year-old should have to. Then he said, "Dad, do you want to hear about how they recycle water on the space station?" And for the first time in a week, he didn't hesitate before asking. "I would love nothing more," I said, and I meant it. By New Year's Eve, I'd made my decisions. Jess and I sat down together and talked through everything methodically, not angrily, not reactively. We made a plan and we executed it with the precision of two people who were absolutely done being pushed around. First, I called my mom's cell carrier and had myself removed as an authorized user on her phone plan. This is a detail most people don't know about, but years ago, when my mom had trouble setting up her smartphone, I'd added myself to her account so I could manage things remotely. I'd been paying for her phone line for 3 years without her even asking. That stopped on December 30th. Second, I called the home security company. My mom had a monitored alarm system that I'd set up for her 2 years prior after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. The account was in my name because she didn't want to deal with the paperwork. I didn't cancel it outright because I'm not a monster, but I transferred the billing to her name, which meant she'd start getting the invoices directly. $340 a year that she didn't even know someone else had been paying. Third, and this was the big one, I contacted her financial advisor. Now, before anyone thinks I was doing something shady, let me explain. When my dad retired, he and my mom asked me to help them organize their finances. I'm a CPA. It's literally what I do for a living. I'd been managing their investment accounts, their tax prep, their quarterly estimated payments, all of it for free for the last 8 years. I wasn't stealing anything. I wasn't touching their money, but I was the reason their money was organized, growing, and not being eaten alive by unnecessary fees. I called the advisor and told him I was stepping back as the point of contact and that all future correspondence should go directly to my parents. The advisor, a guy named Phil who'd worked with my family for a decade, paused on the phone and said, "Luke, are you sure your mother doesn't understand any of this?" I know, I said, that's her problem now. Fourth, I changed the password on the streaming accounts. This sounds petty and honestly it kind of was. But my mom had been using my Netflix, my Hulu, and my Disney Plus for years without contributing a cent. And I figured if she was going to treat my son like an inconvenience, she could at least be inconvenienced by having to figure out how to watch her crime documentaries on her own. By New Year's Day, every invisible thread I'd been holding together for my mother's comfort had been quietly, cleanly cut. She didn't know it yet. She wouldn't find out all at once. It would come in waves, small realizations trickling in over the weeks and months that followed. Each one a little reminder that the son she dismissed for being too much had actually been doing quite a lot. January was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the second wall is coming, but not knowing exactly when. My mom tried calling a few more times in the first week of January, but I didn't answer. She left voicemails that ranged from annoyed to confused to wounded, each one a different flavor of the same refusal to take accountability. "Luke, this has gone on long enough. I spoke to Pastor Davis and he agrees that family should always come first. Your father misses you. You're hurting him by doing this." She never once said she was sorry, not once, not for what she said to Oliver, not for what she'd said to me growing up, not for any of it. Every message was about her feelings, her experience, her version of events. In my mother's world, she was always the protagonist and everyone else existed in supporting roles designed to make her look good. Garrett called me in mid-January. I picked up because despite everything, Garrett and I had never been enemies. We weren't close, but we weren't adversarial. He'd just always been the favorite and he knew it, and we both silently agreed never to talk about it. "Hey," he said, "how are you doing?" "I'm fine, Garrett." "How's Brooke? How are the kids?" "They're good." "Good. Listen, Mom's been calling me nonstop. She's really upset." "I know she is. She says you cut off her streaming accounts and dropped her phone plan and pulled out of Dad's financial stuff." "All true." There was a pause. "Luke, don't you think that's a little extreme, Garrett?" She told my 8-year-old son that people would like him more if he talked less. At Christmas dinner while he was telling her about space. Another pause. Longer this time. "Yeah," he said quietly, "that was bad." "It wasn't just bad, Garrett. It was the same thing she did to me for my entire childhood, and I watched it happen to my kid. And I'm telling you right now, I'm done. I'm done subsidizing her life while she tears down the people I love. She's not going to apologize, you know. I know. So what's the end game here? There isn't one. I'm not playing a game. I'm just not participating anymore. If she wants to apologize, genuinely apologize, not the kind where she says sorry, but immediately follows it with the word, "but then we can talk." Until then, I'm out. Garrett was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised me. "I should have said something at the table when she said that to Oliver. I should have backed you up." "Yeah, I said you should have. I'm sorry." Thanks, Garrett. He paused again. For what it's worth, I think Oliver's a great kid. Mason thinks he's the coolest person alive. He hasn't stopped talking about the space stuff since Christmas. That actually made me smile. Tell Mason that Oliver says hi. We hung up and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not sadness, relief, because Garrett had just confirmed what I'd always suspected, but had never heard anyone in my family admit out loud. He'd seen it. He'd seen what my mom did. He'd always seen it. He just hadn't done anything about it. And now, in his own quiet way, he was telling me I wasn't crazy. February brought the first wave of consequences. My mom called me in a panic because she'd gotten a bill from the security company and didn't understand what it was. I didn't answer. She called Garrett, who called me. She's freaking out about some alarm company bill, he said. I explained that I'd been paying for it and had transferred the billing back to her. Garrett went quiet, and I could almost hear him recalculating how much invisible labor I'd been doing for our parents without anyone noticing. A week later, my mom called the financial advisor trying to get information about her and my dad's accounts. Phil called me afterward. Luke, your mother asked me what a Roth IRA was, he said, sounding like a man who'd just been asked to explain algebra to a golden retriever. She wanted to know why she was getting quarterly statements and what the numbers meant. She said you used to handle all of this. I told Phil that I appreciated his patience and that my parents would need to find a new point of contact going forward. He wished me well and sounded like he meant it. March came and with it tax season. For the first time in 8 years, my parents would have to file their own taxes. My mom called me 11 times on a single Saturday in March. I counted. 11 calls back-to-back, increasingly frantic voicemails about W-2s and 1099s and deductions she didn't understand. She eventually went to one of those tax preparation chains and paid $450 for a service I'd been providing for free. Garrett told me later that she'd been furious about the cost and had complained about it for an entire weekend. Here's the part that's going to sound cold, but I need you to understand where I was mentally. I didn't enjoy any of this. I didn't sit at home rubbing my hands together while my mother struggled. There was no satisfaction in watching her flounder, but there was a grim clarity in seeing for the first time just how much I'd been carrying. For years, I'd been my mother's invisible support system, the person who kept her life running smoothly behind the scenes, while she told me to my face that I was the lesser son, the son who was too much. And now that I'd stopped, the whole structure was wobbling, and everyone could see that the person who'd been holding it up was the one she'd valued the least. Meanwhile, Oliver was thriving, and I mean thriving. Jess and I had enrolled him in a science club at his school, and within 2 months he was leading presentations, organizing the other kids, and building a model of the solar system that took up half the classroom. His teacher, a woman named Mrs. Calloway, pulled us aside at a parent-teacher conference and said, "I've been teaching for 22 years and I've never met a kid with Oliver's communication skills. He can explain complex concepts to other kids in a way that makes them excited to learn. Whatever you're doing at home, keep doing it." Jess squeezed my hand so hard I thought she'd break a bone. We walked out of that conference floating because here was a teacher, a woman whose job it was to know kids, telling us that the exact quality my mother had tried to crush was Oliver's greatest strength. I spent the spring rebuilding the parts of myself that my mother had chipped away over 3 decades. Jess suggested I talk to someone, and for the first time in my life I did. I found a therapist named Dr. Adler who specialized in family dynamics. And every Wednesday at 3:00, I sat in a comfortable chair and unpacked 34 years of being told I was too much. It was brutal. It was necessary. And it was the best thing I'd ever done for myself besides marrying Jess and having Oliver. Dr. Adler helped me see patterns I'd been blind to, the way I'd minimized myself in professional settings, the way I'd apologize before sharing an opinion, the way I'd instinctively make myself smaller in any room that reminded me of my mother's dining table. We worked on all of it, slowly, carefully, like diffusing a bomb that had been ticking for decades. By May, I felt like a different person. Not a new person, more like the person I'd always been underneath the layers of conditioning my mother had stacked on top of me. I was louder, funnier, more present. My colleagues at the accounting firm noticed. My friends noticed. Jess noticed most of all. "There you are," she said one night lying in bed, looking at me with this expression of quiet wonder. "I've been waiting for you to show up." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've always been in there, Luke. The real you. The one your mom tried to edit. He's finally out." And she was right. He was. The confrontation I hadn't planned came in June. Jess, Oliver, and I were at a farmer's market downtown on a Saturday morning. Oliver was at a booth asking a beekeeper approximately 9,000 questions about honey production, and the beekeeper was loving every second of it. Jess and I were standing back watching, laughing, when I heard a voice behind me. "Luke." I turned around and there was my mom. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically exactly, but diminished somehow. Like someone had let the air out of her. She was holding a bag of tomatoes and wearing the same expression she always wore when she was trying to maintain control of a situation that had already slipped away from her. "Mom," I said. Jess moved slightly closer to me, not in front of me, just beside me. Present, solid. "I've been trying to reach you," my mom said. "I know. You haven't returned any of my calls." "I know that too." She glanced over at Oliver, who was now holding a jar of honey up to the sunlight and asking the beekeeper why it was different colors. A flicker of something crossed her face. I couldn't tell if it was tenderness or irritation, and the fact that I couldn't tell said everything. Can we talk, she asked. We can talk right here. She looked around uncomfortable with having this conversation in public. My mother believed family business should stay behind closed doors, which was convenient when you were the one doing damage behind those doors. Fine, she said. I think this has gone far enough. What point do you think I'm making, Mom, that you're angry? About Christmas. About what I said. What did you say, Mom? Tell me specifically. She shifted her weight. I made a comment to Oliver about his talking. It was maybe not the best timing. A comment you told an 8-year-old that people would like him more if he talked less. At Christmas dinner, in front of his entire family, I was trying to help him, Luke. The world isn't going to be as kind as you are. Someone's going to tell him eventually, and I'd rather it come from family. I actually laughed. Just the kind of laugh that comes out when someone says something so fundamentally wrong that your body doesn't know how else to respond. Mom, let me tell you something about Oliver that you would know if you'd ever actually listened to him. His teacher says he's the best communicator she's seen in 22 years. He leads presentations. He makes other kids excited about science. He walks up to beekeepers at farmers markets and makes their day. That is not a flaw. That is who he is, and he is extraordinary. My mom opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. And here's the part you really need to hear. You did the same thing to me. My whole childhood. You spent 30 years telling me I was too much, that I needed to be more like Garrett, and I believed you. I spent years making myself smaller because my own mother told me I was too big. I'm 34 years old and I'm just now with a therapist's help undoing the damage you did. Her face changed, not softened, more like cracked, like a mask developing hairline fractures. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to prepare you for the world. You weren't preparing me for anything. You were reshaping me into someone who didn't inconvenience you. There's a difference. Jess stepped in. She'd been quiet the entire time, but she stepped in now. And when Jess speaks, you listen, because she doesn't waste words. Diane, she said, I work with children every day. Children who would give anything to have Oliver's ability to express himself. What you said to him at that dinner was not constructive, and it was not loving. It was cruel, and the fact that you can stand here 6 months later and still frame it as helping tells me that you don't understand what you did. My mom's eyes went wide. Jess had never once confronted my mother directly in all the years we'd been together. She'd bitten her tongue at 100 dinners and smiled through it all because she was trying to keep the peace. But the peace was over, and Jess wasn't smiling. I want to see my grandson, my mom said, and for the first time her voice cracked. Why, I asked, not rhetorically. Why do you want to see him? Because every time you're around him, you spend the entire visit trying to make him less of who he is. You shush him. You correct him. You give him that look, the same one you used to give me, like he's embarrassing you just by being alive. She didn't answer right away. She looked at the ground, wrestling with something I'd never seen her wrestle with before. My mother always had an answer, always had a deflection, but standing in a farmer's market holding a bag of tomatoes, she had nothing. Because he's my grandson, she finally said, and I miss him. Then you need to do the work, I said. Go to therapy. Understand why you feel the need to control everyone around you. And if you can genuinely do that, not just go twice and call it done, then maybe we can talk about a supervised visit. But I am telling you right now, if you ever say anything like that to my son again, you will never see him. Not at holidays, not at birthdays, not at graduation. Never. She stared at me for a long time, and then she did something I'd never seen her do. She nodded. Just a small, tired nod, like a woman who'd finally run out of ways to avoid the truth. Okay, she said. Okay, Luke. She turned and walked to her car with her tomatoes and drove away. I watched her go and felt something complicated settle over me. Not victory, not satisfaction, more like the feeling you get when you set down something very heavy that you've been carrying for so long, you forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. That was 8 months ago. My mom started therapy in August. Garrett told me she goes every other week to a counselor in Waterloo and she hates it, which honestly makes me think it's working. People who enjoy therapy from day one are usually not the ones who need it most. We haven't had a visit yet. We've had 2 phone calls, both brief, both awkward, both notably free of criticism about Oliver. She asked about his school and his science club. She didn't offer opinions. She just listened, which for my mother was roughly the equivalent of climbing Everest in sandals. I'm not naive enough to think she's fixed, but she's trying grudgingly, uncomfortably against every instinct in her control-obsessed body. And that tells me she heard me maybe for the first time ever. Oliver is 9 now. He's still the kid who talks to everyone, who asks a million questions, who lights up every room he walks into. But he's also a kid who knows that his dad will go to war for him. Not with fists, not with cruelty, but with boundaries and honesty. And the kind of love that says, I will not let anyone diminish you, even if that someone is family. Jess and I are stronger than ever. She tells me that standing up to my mom at that dinner was the moment she fell in love with me all over again. I tell her she's the reason I had the strength to do it, because she showed me what it looked like to be loved without condition. As for me, I talk more now than I ever have. I'm louder at work. I'm funnier with friends. I tell stories at dinner parties, and I don't edit myself halfway through. I am by my mother's old standards entirely too much, and it feels incredible. Some people are going to read this and think I was too harsh. To those people I'd say this: There is a difference between giving someone grace and giving someone a target. I gave my mother grace for 34 years, and she used it to take shots at a child, my child. The line isn't just drawn, it's concrete. Oliver asked me the other day if I think Grandma is getting nicer. I told him I think Grandma is learning the same way he learns new things at school. Some lessons are harder than others, and some people need more time. He thought about that for a second and said, maybe she should join my science club. We're really patient with the new kids, and there it is. My son too much, according to some exactly enough, according to everyone who matters.